This video is sponsored by the fine folks over at Last Ark Tactics Analog. More information at the end of the video. Hello everybody, CritCrab here with another story, this one about an entire family of that guys and their collective quest to be the worst D&D players in the world. Roll post. This story happened approximately 12-ish years ago when I was 11 or 10 years old and a completely starry-eyed newbie at D&D. Nowadays, I'm a pretty seasoned player who also wrote some of my own campaigns, but we all start somewhere. I was always fascinated with D&D since I was very young because my dad and brother played it, and I looked up to both of them a lot. I also loved the concept and I liked fantasy, so I was in fact very overjoyed when they finally let me in on the fun. Now that I'm older, I can recognize that my dad and brother aren't actually great DMs, my brother especially. This story in particular always comes to mind, and it took me a combo of years and meeting new people to finally realize my brother was just being a jerk for no reason, and some people are just bad DMs. For context, my brother is 8 years older than me, so he was 20-ish here, and he disapproves of everyone and everything. He's one of those DMs who hates it when players have too much fun, and for him, the rules come first before anything else. He's also super high and mighty about the different editions and swears by 3.5 and openly says that people who play 5e are mentally deficient. This story is just one example of his approach to D&D. So, I'm a very excited kid who knows next to nothing about the rules, and boy, was I ready to go on an adventure. I rolled up a half-elf bard named Onyx. I always loved bards because of Tom Marilyn from The Wheel of Time, and my cousin and uncle are my fellow party members, but their characters are not relevant here. This is 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, by the way. So after a battle and some looting, the party stopped at a small village, and we had downtime before we set off on our quest, investigating a rumor in a distant city. I had a lot of gold and wanted to spend it, so I thought that it would be a good idea to buy a mount for the journey. Because my character was so small, I had her purchase a pony. My brother was not happy about this and asked me several times if I was sure, stressing that this would be an absolute waste of money. I insisted that I was sure because I didn't think it was a big deal, and he didn't know that the main reason I went straight for a pony was because my brother had a companion who rode a pony in a separate game that my dad was running, and I wanted to emulate that. Anyway, I buy my pony, and in an attempt to sound more grown-up and serious, I named him Snake Eyes. My brother did not hesitate to tell me how stupid he thought that was. I was hurt, but we had an adventure to go on. So Onyx and Snake Eyes were only a little bit down the road when I realized that my brother was not going to let me off easy here. It was quickly established in the narrative that Snake Eyes was the most stubborn, uncooperative, ill-tempered pony you could ever meet. He constantly tried to bite at Onyx, wouldn't listen to a single command, and kept trying to run off at every free moment. It was quickly becoming unfun for me, and I started to resent my purchase, but I pressed on, trying to hold on to any optimism I had left. We came across an illusion of a fire, and we could not convince Snake Eyes to walk through it. I understand the logic here, but my brother practically held up the game for 20 minutes trying to force me to abandon my pony by making it refuse to continue. After a lot of deliberation, my uncle suggested we blindfold Snake Eyes and lead him through the fire, which my brother begrudgingly allowed. Finally, at setting up camp, I was feeling pretty bad, 11-year-old child guilt, and was trying to build some kind of bond with Snake Eyes by feeding him apples and petting him. But my brother made it clear that Snake Eyes still absolutely hated me. Anyways, in the middle of the night, orcs attacked our campsite and we had to defend it. Despite being tied to a tree, Snake Eyes managed to free himself in the confusion and took off running into the forest, never to be seen again. Well, at least until we found his corpse later, gutted and strung up in a tree by orcs. I was very upset at the loss of my pony and my money, and as a kid I found this a very discouraging introduction to D&D, because I just wanted to have a pony like that other character and my brother had to ruin it. After the session, I confronted my brother and asked why he had to be such an ass, paraphrasing, about my pony and why he had to make it uncooperative and desperate to run away. And he just shrugged and said, "It's your fault, you should have bought a war pony, they listen better. Rip Snake Eyes. You are still missed." TLDR, it was my first time playing D&D at age 11. My brother buys a pony for a mount. The DM, my strict, rules-obsessed older brother, takes issue with this and decides to punish me the whole game for not knowing better by making it the meanest pony ever. And then kills the pony. End post. I think it goes without saying that intentionally ruining players' fun just for the sake of ruining it is one of the cardinal sins of DMing. Doing the same to a new player who is also a child no less should have one's DMing license permanently revoked. Now, some may be wondering, but wait, OP's fellow party members, their family members, did nothing to stop this? Well, you would be correct as evidenced by this exchange in the comments. So, your brother was bad, quite an ass, and that's being very mean with asses. But, your dad said nothing? Your uncle? Like, you have this 20-year-old man literally bullying and traumatizing a kid with a dead pony and they said nothing? OP responded, yes, your observation is correct. My dad actually was not present for this story, but he would have allowed it. My brother has always been an uptight jerk and my family never does anything because they don't want to rock the boat. My uncle and cousin included. In defense of my cousin though, I don't think he quite understood that it was actually upsetting me so much. People just kind of accept the injustices in my family and nobody does anything. Anyways, all this aside, there are 2 more parts to this story, so without further ado, roll post. Now, as some have kindly pointed out, while my brother may be a big jerk about the rules of the game, that isn't really the source of his issues as a DM as much as his aggressive need for total control. So I do apologize to all of the rules lovers out there. I never meant to imply following the rules is a bad thing. It's always about being a jerk. So my brother hates flavorful character backgrounds and thinks that they're a waste of time. Before you ask, I don't know what happened to him in his life that made him fly into a rage at the thought of people having fun, but that's how he is. My brother is Chekhov's gunslinger, because you don't include anything in D&D if it's not going to serve a functional purpose, he has said. I find it really annoying when players want to make special characters with fancy backgrounds. It's way more respectable and interesting if your character's just a normal guy on an adventure. In his eyes, he's doing you a favor by DMing, and you have to understand that it's his story that you have the privilege to participate in. The players do not get to tell him what the story is about. The characters are just in his story for you to interact with the world, that is all. If you handed my brother a multi-page backstory, he would look you in the eyes as he threw it in the trash. So the story is 50% about his hatred of writing characters creatively, and 50% about his major control issues. So on to the story. This takes place about a year or 2 after Snake Eyes the pony was laid to rest. So I was about 13 years old. My brother, 22-ish, was home visiting from college and I asked him to play D&D since my dad was only DMing for me once a year. My brother said sure, and I was so happy to play that I didn't consider that of course there was going to be a catch. I called my cousin and step-uncle, different uncle from the first story, to come over and play D&D. While we were waiting for them to show up, my brother said that it was time to make characters. Personally, character creation is one of my favorite parts of D&D, and I felt this way back then too. So I was excited. I was going to play another bard because I always play bards and he knows this. So I started, saying, alright, I think I'll play a half-elf bard, but he cut me off and said, what makes you think you get to decide? I stammered at this because I was totally confused. I thought the whole point of D&D was making your own character. He told me that character creation takes too long, so he would be writing our characters for us. I asked again if he could at least write the character I wanted to play because it would take the same amount of time, and he said absolutely not. So he started rolling dice and saying that he was going to make me play a guy character, and probably a dwarf paladin or something. Now, at the time, I was a young girl, right on the cusp of puberty in middle school, who was extremely insecure about my perceived femininity because I was a little overweight back then. D&D was a huge escape for me at the time to play the pretty girls that I wished I could be. I did not want to play a guy, especially not a dwarf, and so I started panicking at this. After a bit of an anxious meltdown of me begging my brother to not make me a guy, not make me a dwarf, please let me play a bard. I did not want to self-associate myself with the masculinity of a tank character class either. I even told him why I was upset, because I had very low self-esteem about how people saw me. He just argued that dwarves are awesome and that I should feel honored to play one. By the time my cousin and step-uncle showed up, my brother sighed and I thought he was going to cut me some slack. But then he said, "Class, race, or sex? I'll only let you pick one." Before I could comment, he followed with, "Or we could just not play. You want to play, right?" Understanding my power in the situation and not wanting to make a scene in front of my cousin and step-uncle, I told my brother that I at least wanted to be a girl, because that was probably the most important to me and I knew he would make me play a guy if I didn't pick it. So my brother continued to roll dice and write my entire character for me right in front of my eyes. No input from me at all. My cousin and step-uncle weren't as bothered by having all their characters written for them. So it was time to start the game, and my brother distributed our character sheets and described our characters and their backgrounds to us. No surprise here, my brother handed me a dwarf fighter, but he, quote, did me a favor because at least she was a girl, and he did not waste time to describe the impressively thick beard she had. I was holding back tears. But what really did it in for me was when he turned to my step-uncle and said, "So you're playing a half-elf bard." I almost had a breakdown at this, and looking back, I should have left right then and there. But I was still an insecure 13-year-old girl who was so D&D starved that I was desperate to just play, even if it meant I had to put up with having a buff and ugly dwarf woman, while my step-uncle across the table got to play the character of my dreams. I don't know how I managed to do it without bursting into tears. TLDR, my brother hates letting players write their own characters, and he makes me, a 13-year-old girl, cry because I had body issues about my weight and he forced me to play a stocky dwarf woman anyway. Proceeds to let my uncle play the character I wanted to play right in front of me because f*** me, I guess. P.S. Nothing against dwarves, masculine women, and tanks. This was just my preteen perception of those classes at the time. Nowadays I know that you can be a tank and be feminine at the same time. End post. What can possibly go so terribly wrong in an adult man's head that they have to bully a little girl just to get any satisfaction? Like, this guy is so cartoonishly evil that he sounds like a Disney villain minus the self-awareness. But seriously, what kind of DM even wants to have to make everyone's characters for them without any input whatsoever? That sounds more like a chore than anything else, especially given the DM was specifically designing characters to thwart players' wants and desires. Not to mention, D&D is a collaborative storytelling experience, and limiting it all to one person sounds more akin to watching paint dry than actually playing a game. Needless to say, DM here is a dick, but unfortunately it doesn't get any better. Even worse, this next one isn't even about him. Roll post. Okay, before you ask, I have no idea what's up with the men in my family and animal companions either. Hi again. Last week I wrote about Snake Eyes the pony and was very pleased by his resulting popularity because I always wanted him to live on in more hearts than just mine. Now that that dream is achieved, my second story wasn't as popular, but those of you who read both have really helped me come to terms with the reality that my brother treaded the lines of emotional abuse far more than just being a bad DM. Writing these stories has brought on a lot of catharsis for me, so I'm going to continue posting as many stories as I remember until I eventually run out of content or am accused of making it all up, whichever comes first. I can assure you that all these accounts are true, and up until 2018, the RPG side of my life has just been one big horror story. So, on to today's story. I figured you guys are all exhausted from hating my brother so much, so we'll take a break from him and talk about my dad. So about my dad. He's been playing since the 80s and is completely unwilling to adapt, which is why I grew up playing 2nd edition until I was 20. He's very much a better DM than my brother, but not by the hugest margin. Put it like this, he's much more inclined to make the game fun, knows when it's okay to be looser with the rules, and isn't mean just to upset and punish players like Big Brother is. However, I would say he is very limited creatively, which caused him to develop a very bad knack for railroading. Which, oh boy, is my next story gonna cover that. Anyways, I don't fault him too much for his lower creativity because some people are just weaker in that aspect. His best friend growing up was one of those mega DMs who built a whole world, and my dad really admired him but couldn't replicate it himself. Some people just don't have that spark in them, and that's okay. What's not okay, however, is my dad's sick sense of humor. See, he's stubborn, and it contributes horribly to his railroading. But my dad would also just do awful things because he thinks he's a lot funnier than he actually is. He also really enjoys putting players in uncomfortable situations. A short example, once in a previous game, the party was split. My cousin had to mercy kill an NPC who was maimed beyond repair from an Iron Maiden. And my dad just decided that the entire party teleported across the whole dungeon just so everyone could conveniently walk in on my cousin killing this NPC so awkward misunderstandings could ensue. So to put it simply, my brother will do things to hurt players, but my dad likes embarrassing his players. I don't know, everyone has their kinks apparently. This story is just an example of my dad's fury and the lack of limits to what he finds funny. So I'm 11 here, which means this is only a few months after the tragedy that is Snake Eyes the Pony, and my dad is running Palace of the Silver Princess. Original orange cover, I will fight you. For me and my cousins. Since there was only 2 of us, my dad supplemented our party with some NPCs, but the only relevant one here is Dewey the Cleric. So we come across this cave where we hear a lot of growling in the distance, and we follow the sound only to find a scared, starving, emaciated bear cub chained to the wall. But I'm an 11-year-old girl and a huge animal lover, so my heart breaks and I insist that we help it. I fed it rations, it ate the rations, but it's still a bear, so it hasn't stopped showing hostility towards the party. Concerned, I beg Dewey the Cleric to do something, because as a godly man, he should know a few tricks, right? So Dewey sits down next to the bear for a couple rounds, whispering a lot of things, and before we know it, the bears went from hostile to sweet. This is where I first learned about animal friendship. I was overjoyed at this, and we set the bear free, and I'm pretty sure I named it Teacup. So we set off to explore the rest of the dungeon with our new animal companion in tow. It didn't take long for the problems to start. The problem here being a pit trap. The rope we tied across the opening of the pit was good enough for a party member, but bears aren't really known for their tightrope walking skills, so we had to think up an alternative. When my character was trying to explain how the party could rig up some kind of pulley system for Teacup to get across the pit using a couple of ropes and a bedroll, a wandering monster was triggered on our side of the hallway, and Teacup barreled forward in a panic and jumped into the pit. The wandering monster was dispatched quickly, and the party looked down in the pit to see if Teacup survived the landing. In all honesty, Dad, it would have been better if you just killed the bear right then and there. But no, my dad did not mince words as he described how Teacup's body was contorted and broken from the impact, but still alive and crying out in pain. My dad took special care to illustrate how Teacup's front paws were bent entirely backwards, wrist bones broken through the skin, and sticking out where we all could see. Blood was everywhere, of course. Poor Teacup locked eyes with my character almost accusingly, as if asking why I put it in such a situation in the first place. The whole time, my dad had the biggest shit-eating grin as he said all of this. My character had to euthanize Teacup with an arrow. I was the only archer, and I cried. My dad joked about this story for years. He actually thought it was the funniest thing ever, both the cold-blooded bear homicide and my reaction to it. Teacup the bear had an even shorter lifespan than Snake Eyes the pony. TLDR, playing D&D at age 11. My character adopts a bear cub that my dad promptly murders almost immediately within the span of 20 minutes, giving it the cruelest death possible with broken limbs and vivid detail. End post. Holy shit. I don't think I'm exactly going against the grain here when I say that the that guys mentioned in these stories fit the term abusive to the letter. Unfortunately, sometimes the best thing you can really do with these types is limit contact with them as feasibly as possible. A parent who would intentionally and gruesomely go out of their way to kill an animal just to hurt their child's feelings makes me wonder how he would act when he wasn't just playing a game. If this is his idea of fun, what's his idea of parenting? On another note, tabletop role-playing games can be used as a much-needed retreat from real-world issues and has done wonders for me growing up and even now. When I was a kid, and especially as a teenager, when it would all get to be too much, I would withdraw into writing and world building. and letting players loose into the worlds and games I created gave me a sort of therapeutic fulfillment I didn't have in my real life. I genuinely don't know how I would have survived if I didn't have that sort of creative outlet growing up, which is why it hits me so personally when I see it being weaponized against the same kids and young people who could benefit greatly from it. This video has gone on long enough, but just before I close, I just want to tell anyone who might be watching this, specifically people who are running or plan to run games for kids or young teenagers, to try and make it a good, memorable experience. Because when they grow older and start running games of their own, for better or for worse, they're going to remember their time spent with their childhood DM, and it's going to affect the way they play. Some of my highest respects go to the older DMs who make an effort to show the next generation of players and game masters how amazing this little hobby can be. So if that's you, then go forth with the Crab King's blessing. Anyways, let me tell you about our sponsors today, Last Ark. Last Ark Tactics Analog is a tactical D20-based TTRPG with a talent tree-based progression system instead of a fixed leveling system to give players more choice in building their perfect character. That's honestly one of the most exciting things about Last Ark. The system is designed for quick and easy multiclassing so you can design your unique character to a T. But the best thing? There's a free demo PDF available on their website. But if you want to go even deeper, a Patreon with exclusive supporter content. All that complete with beautiful JRPG aesthetics that are reminiscent of games like Final Fantasy or Fire Emblem. They even have a Discord server. I have spent hours playing Last Ark there. It's an amazing community, and hey, if you're looking for a game of Last Ark, that would be the place to go. Also, there's something really big cooking up behind the scenes, so we're going to be hearing from our friends at Last Ark sometime very soon. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one. Till next time.